I am now joined by Omenyi, who is the coordinator for Sustainable Energy Access Forum right here in Kenya to talk about renewable energy in the country. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we know Kenya targets to achieve 100% electricity access by the year 2030, and that requires investment. I'd like to know where you stand, and as a coordinator, do you think the investments that we are getting right now into the country are geared towards ensuring that by 2030 we achieve universal access to all?
Thank you. So my name is Omenyi, working in the Sustainable Energy Access Forum Kenya, which is a network that provides a platform for stakeholders in the energy sector to come together and advocate for issues of energy access. As you've rightly put it, the President made a commitment that by 2030, Kenya should transition to clean and renewable energy. Just to note that our current electricity generation has about 92%. The grid is 92% renewable. So we are doing quite well. But again, you realize as a country, we rely heavily on fossil fuels and other dirty and polluting fuels to power industries, to power the manufacturing industries, transport. And therefore, as a country, when it comes to investments, there is a long way to go in order to achieve this transition to 100%. There are quite a number of investments we are seeing that are coming in. For instance, the European Investment Bank has committed about 240 million Kenyan shillings to help the country to invest in green hydrogen, to help the country to be able to realize this venture. When you're looking at the country's nationally determined contributions, which are submitted in 2020 to the UNFCCC, you've seen the country is seeking to raise about $62 billion to help it to adapt and mitigate issues of climate change by 2030 to cut its emission by 32%. So as a country, there is that commitment we are seeing, but then there is a big gap when it comes to actualizing the investments, because out of the $62 billion I mentioned, almost 90% are supposed to come from international support. The country is only able to mobilize about 10%. Therefore, that requires a lot of commitment in terms of engaging multilateral development banks who are able to finance these investments, engaging the private sector to be able to provide this financing, and engaging donor countries who are developed countries who are able to help us in this. No. So we hope to see that the government is going to be able to have these bilateral discussions with these agencies who can help us to realize that. Just to mention also, there is the adaptation financing that was committed by developed countries of 100 billion annually to be channeled to developing countries to enable them to be able to adapt and invest in issues of addressing climate change. So we hope that the government can be able to then have this commitment to direct most of the funds to addressing issues of energy access, because the need to access energy has been one of the leading contributors to global emissions, which is driving climate change.
Okay, and with such increased investment, are we likely to see Kenya becoming a superpower when it comes to energy in Africa?
Definitely, that's our aim. When you're talking about 92% of our electricity generation being grid, and the whole world is transitioning from the dirty fuels to green investment. So Kenya is then poised to be a leader in the issues of green investment. I think the gap has been, most of our technologies are imported from other countries. So I think as a country, if we are able to invest in production of this equipment, including solar panels, for instance, the windmills that we import, all those technologies that enable us to generate and be able to produce electricity locally, then we are going to be a leader when it comes to green electricity generation, that you can be able to meet the needs of the residents and citizens of Kenya, and be able to supply with the access to our neighboring countries who can be able to then depend on us. So already we are leading in geothermal production in Africa. Our grid is about 43% from geothermal, which is the largest in Africa. And we have greater potential that I believe as a country we can be able to invest in and be able to be at the top.
Okay. Even as the country makes progress maybe towards clean energy and also energy access goals, what is the role of solar? I know you've mentioned solar and wind, and also does Kenya need to pursue maybe an off-grid to ensure that we achieve this 100% transition?
Thank you. When you look at issue in terms of connectivity, we have about 75% of Kenyans, that is official statistics from the government, having connectivity to electricity. But of course, we have to also gauge and see there's that difference between the grid passing near your house and there's the actual connectivity in your house and you being able to utilize the electricity. And therefore, when you're looking at off-grid communities who are mostly actually the ones who are marginalized, there is a big role that solar plays in bridging this gap from the grid. We've seen the COSAP project that is being funded by the World Bank being implemented in, I think, 14 counties, the marginalized counties, trying to bridge the gap of enabling these communities to be able to utilize solar and other sources of energy to be able to the off-grid communities to be able to access electricity. We've seen the government try to invest more in wind generation. There was a project that was being launched in Turkana to support such communities who are in the off-grid areas to enable them to be able to access electricity. And therefore, solar provides a good alternative as a renewable energy source because it's self-regenerating, it's a sustainable venture, and it's also creating job opportunities for our communities. And therefore, with sufficient investments, then the government is able to achieve 100% connectivity by our communities. And our call then comes in to the government to be able to provide incentives and subsidies that are going to enable communities to afford these solar panels and be able to connect solar in their homes and even use it in businesses, what we call productive users of energy, so that they can be able to develop socioeconomic wise, to be able to generate an income at the same time being able to access power and energy within their homes and communities.
Okay. Brian, I'd like us to talk about the Power Up campaign. Yes. I know it's a campaign that is a coalition of several global players, and I'd like you to elaborate more on that. And I know there's an African Climate Week coming up in September. Maybe you can start with the Power Up campaign.
Thank you. So the Power Up campaign is a global call that is bringing together about 70 partners, ranging from civil society organizations, private sector institutions, different other development-related organizations that are supported issues of energy access. So the campaign is seeking at promoting investments within the African region in regards to issues of climate adaptation, and our call is for increased investments in green energy to enable energy access, realizing that energy is a greater contributor to issues of global emissions when you're talking about fossil fuels. So how do we then ensure that we have the renewable energy that is being invested largely in to drive and address issues of climate change? So within Kenya, actually we are glad that Kenya is the first country that we are having the national level campaign, which is being launched on 5th of June, which is in 2 days. And we have already developed about 9 asks that are going to have formed part of our policy brief, which we are going to use to engage government agencies, use it to engage the civil society, private sector, and we hope to drive increased investments, calling for enhanced public-private partnerships as a source of increased investments to spearhead energy access within the African context. So it's a great call, and we are inviting all stakeholders to be part of this important call. And we hope the campaign is going to run up to the Africa Climate Summit, which is going to be held in September here in Nairobi, where we will be able to have more discussions to ensure that as Kenya we are able to achieve the 100% energy access.
So the theme for this Power Up campaign is increased investment in energy?
Yeah, as a climate adaptation strategy.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that has been Brian Omenyi, who is a coordinator for Sustainable Energy Access Forum Kenya. talking to us about the Power Up campaign, which is coming up in 2 days, and also the African Climate Week campaign in September. Well, that is all I had lined up for you. Ben Troy, rather, is on the other end of the studio with a sports update.